You know, in history class, you always heard of great adventures from explorers like Lewis and Clark, Leif Erikson, and Christopher Columbus. You know what? No, scratch that last guy. But it got me thinking, there's really nothing left to explore on this earth except the experiences you haven't had. So, in order to spice up my life and, you know, go on a little adventure of my own, I thought I'd get a baby. The Legend of Zelda, a series that needs no introduction. If you've played a single top-down adventure game, or even any third-person action game in the last 20 years, you've felt the impact of Zelda. Dark Souls, The Binding of Isaac, Genshin Impact, and 3D Game Heroes. These are all amazing games, except for you, and they have everything I love about Zelda in them. Whether that be the 3D combat, the exploration, the grueling dungeons with the hard bosses at the end, you can tell these mechanics, these core elements of these games have been meticulously experimented with and thought about extensively throughout the years. I mean, look at Ocarina of Time's combat compared to Dark Souls. The difference is mind-blowing, and I love it, but the story of those games will come at a different time. Because right now, I'm more interested in how we got here. Well, Your Honor, it all started with The Legend of Zelda for the NES, the first adventure game of all time, which revolutionized history. Objection! Adventure for the Atari 2600 actually came first, and it predates Zelda 1 by 6 years. Overruled, I want to hear him cook. This game rocks. No, like literally, there's rocks in it. I hate this guy. Zelda 1, the first one to start it all. It's alright. I mean, I really love the idea of this game, but it doesn't do well in the execution of it. This game is all about going on an adventure in a big world, at the time, to defeat a giant magical pigman and save a princess. You would know none of this unless you beat the game or read the manual. But that's the thing about Zelda though. When you first boot up the game, there really isn't anything to tell you what to do or where to go. Like, what do I do? Of course, there are small visual hints like with the first screen where the black box of the cave draws the player into it to get the sword, but the player could also just not immediately grab the sword, run around aimlessly for a while, get frustrated, and quit or maybe die and end up back on the first screen with the same choice. It's a lot of trust that's put onto the player to figure out what they have to do themselves, and I'm all for this when it's handled properly. Like in the first screen. There are plenty of indicators around the map to find mandatory items and optional ones, like the wooden tiles on the map that indicate you can travel on the water if you have the right item. And, is that really the only indicator? Of course there are NPCs that tell you hints at what to do and where to go, but, what do you mean I have to master using it? What is it? What old man at which grave? This could just be chopped up to a localization issue, but even if that is the case, it's an inherent flaw that causes more confusion than help in what could have been a beautiful open world game from the 80s. Most of the time, exploring this open world is a frustration instead of something fun and joyous after the first hour of wandering around aimlessly. This is also because the combat isn't really that crazy either. You can move in 4 directions and can only stab your sword in those same directions. There's some ranged options, like when you're at full health, your sword will shoot a beam out of it. You can fire arrows, and there's a wand you get later in the game that essentially replaces the sword beam. It's very basic, which is fine as long as the enemies are interesting, which, I mean, like, they're kinda. The first enemy you can encounter, the Octorok, is one of the most genius introductions into a combat system I've seen. On any of the screens you first walk into, the Octorok spawn in front of you, making the player either walk towards them or walk away out of fear. Depending on the choice the player makes, you either learn A, I can shoot magical swords, B, I can block projectiles, or C, it's okay to take damage in this game, I have a lot of health. Well, more than one, because games in the 80s, you know, sometimes you just get hit one time and you die. Anyway, this is all packed into the first encounter and none of it is blatantly told to you. You discover it. We honestly need to bring back this ideology to modern gaming. Anyway. There are a bunch of other enemies in this game that function the exact same way as the Octorok, so it prepares you for practically every fight in the game. Some enemies, like bosses, only have specific weaknesses that you have to discover through hints from NPCs, which, I mean, they sometimes make sense, or just from player experimentation. But let's talk about probably the best designed enemy in this game, the Darknut. This beautiful bastard has a single gimmick. He can only be damaged from anywhere but the front, and only with your sword. It is a shame that this is one of the only enemies with an interesting and fun gimmick, as I think this game could have had more interestingly gimmicked enemies, like maybe an enemy that can only be damaged with fire, because the only time fire is used in this game is either to burn trees or light up a room, which, I mean, is also really cool. But it sucks that they completely ruin how cool the Dark Nut is by throwing 90 of them in a room with magical balls being hurled at you, because, I don't know, that seems like fun. Dark Nuts in huge volumes like this take away everything cool about the fight and makes the player instead run around frantically, throwing random stabs out as they pray they don't take damage. It's more annoying than fun, which you can say about most things in this game. Like, I mean, how am I supposed to know to light this tree on fire? It looks the same as every other fucking tree. And running around just testing every little thing to see if it opens a hidden staircase would be stupid. I just want to know how getting this croissant is supposed to signal to me that, okay, now I'm able to move this rock. You could make the argument that this is all optional, like, okay, fair, but it's still locking player progression behind bullshit, and that's why I'll criticize it. Also, why is this a choice? Who the fuck is going to choose the potion over the permanent heart? And even then, why trap the player into not being able to get full health?
Objection! Your Honor, he's just stupid. I suggest 5 years of hard labor? No, he's got a point to an extent. Continue.
Well, even if the open world has problems, one of the selling points of the original Zelda is its discovery in the open world. And this would cause every Zelda game after it to try and capture the same magic of exploring its world. Miyamoto has stated in the past that he tried to replicate the feeling he got from exploring the countryside of Japan as a kid. I honestly couldn't tell you how this relates to that feeling, but it's precisely the reason that this game is as special as it is and as loved as it is. Hyrule feels like a place that has rules, and the ones that know its secrets will be rewarded. It's a breath of fresh air in a world plagued with open world games that look like this. However, you will only feel this way if you play this game in the most sadistic way possible, that is, without a guide. If you want to enjoy this game in the current day, please, I implore you to look up a guide. It is not worth spending hours trying to just find the next dungeon you have to go to, or even finding the last dungeon in the game. Like, what is it about this wall that makes it bombable? And while we're on the topic of the final dungeon, how am I supposed to know how to kill Ganon, the final boss? In the dungeon, there are 2 items you can find, the red ring and the silver arrow, though that wasn't really the case for any other dungeon before it. And in my humble opinion, both of these items are necessary in order to beat the game. So as a player, you kind of just wouldn't know that you were doing something wrong and you thought the game was cheating you, because in order to kill Ganon, you have to hit him 4 times while he's invisible teleporting around, and then shoot a silver arrow at him when he changes color, just to win. It's not even like that crazy of a fight, but it is what it is. I had more fun fighting the giant dragon in the first dungeon, but whatever. This game, using a guide, took me about 4 hours to beat. I mean, that's like an afternoon. And this is me we're talking about. Can I not go right here? Why can't I go right? What the fuck? This is bullshit. So, that kind of applies to the average person, and if you're even good at video games, it should probably take you even less than that.
Alright, I've heard enough. I don't think there's enough evidence to charge this man. I think we should let him go. Your Honor, with all due respect, this man killed a baby. So it seems like you can't get out of life in prison by distracting the judge about a game that came out 40 years ago. But I do have a plan to get out. See, this company approached me with this deal where they would pay my bail as long as I signed up for this thing called indentured servitude. I don't really know what it means, but as long as I'm out of here, I don't think I'll really care that much. This blows.